Welcome to the channel, where history, war, and human fate are told through a cinematic lens. If you seek truth and forgotten moments, you're in the right place. And now, we begin. Section 1. The Border of Silence. October 22nd, 1962. Checkpoint Charlie, Berlin. The wind cuts through the concrete corridor like a blade. It carries the smell of wet stone, diesel fuel, and old fear. Somewhere behind the wall, a radio crackles with static and distant Soviet march music. On the western side, an American M48 Patton tank idles, its engine rumbling low and impatient. Opposite it, barely 30 meters away, a Soviet T-55 waits in silence, its gun barrel fixed forward like an unblinking eye. You can hear boots on gravel. Captain James R. Hale, U.S. Army Military Intelligence, pulls his coat tighter as he steps out of the low concrete building that serves as the American checkpoint office. He is 34 years old, lean from years of service, with eyes that have learned not to linger. Berlin has taught him that. Berlin has taught everyone that. In his left breast pocket is a letter, not a report, not an order, a letter. Paper, folded twice. Ink smudged slightly at the edges, as if the writer hesitated, then pressed harder. Hale glances toward the wall. Fresh concrete still bleeds gray, where the East Germans poured it only 14 months ago. Barbed wire coils along the top like rusted thorns. Beyond it lies East Berlin, the German Democratic Republic, and behind that, the vast, watchful presence of the Soviet Union. And tonight, on this exact night, the world is holding its breath. In Cuba, American reconnaissance planes have photographed Soviet missile sites, nuclear warheads capable of reaching Washington in minutes. The White House is locked in crisis meetings. Soviet ships steam toward a U.S. naval blockade. Every man at this checkpoint knows the unspoken truth. If war begins, Berlin will be one of the first places to burn. Hale exhales slowly. The letter feels heavier than it should. The day began before dawn, with a knock on his apartment door in Zehlendorf. 3 sharp raps, official, final. By the time Hale reached headquarters, the corridors were alive with whispered urgency. Phones rang and rang again. Teletype machines clattered like nervous insects. A lieutenant shoved a classified folder into Hale's hands and told him to read it, then immediately took it back. "You didn't see that," the lieutenant said. Hale nodded. That was how the Cold War worked. You knew just enough to be afraid. But the letter had arrived later, slipped under his office door in a plain, unmarked envelope. No stamps, no return address, just his name, written in careful block letters. Best J. Hale, inside a single page. Captain Hale, you do not know me, but you should. If you are reading this, then the world is closer to ending than either of us were taught to believe. Hale had read it 3 times before he realized his hands were shaking. The signature at the bottom had frozen him in place. Colonel Alexei Morozov, Soviet Army, Group of Forces in Germany. Morozov. The name was not unfamiliar. 5 years earlier, in 1957, Hale had served as a junior intelligence officer during an exchange mission in Vienna. Officially, it was about military transparency. Unofficially, it was a polite dance between enemies who studied one another for weakness. Morozov had been there then. A Soviet liaison officer, impeccably uniformed, with iron-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. He spoke English with a faint Georgian accent and quoted Tolstoy as easily as he discussed tank divisions. They had shared cigarettes on a balcony overlooking the Danube. They had spoken of weather, of families, of books they pretended to read for pleasure rather than instruction. They had never spoken of ideology, but it had filled the air between them all the same. At the end of that week, Morozov had shaken Hale's hand. History, Morozov had said quietly, is made by men who follow orders, and saved by men who question them. Hale had not known what to say then. He still wasn't sure now. Back at Checkpoint Charlie, A sergeant approaches, voice low. "Sir, East German patrol just increased. 2 more Vopos on the line." Hale nods. The People's Police. Young, tense, fingers always too close to the trigger. On nights like this, mistakes happen. He looks again at the letter, remembering the rest of its words. "And there are things I cannot write. There are things I should not know. But I know this. If events continue as planned, there will be no victory. Only ashes. I am asking you, not as an enemy, but as a man, to listen. No coordinates, no demands, just an invitation and a warning." Hale had taken the letter straight to his commanding officer. The response was immediate and brutal. "This is provocation," Colonel Watkins had said. "Or a trap, or both." "Sir," Hale had replied carefully, "Morozov is real. He's senior. He's positioned close enough to know things." Watkins had stared at him for a long moment. "Even if that's true," he said, "you don't freelance diplomacy in the middle of a nuclear standoff." The meeting had ended there, unofficially. Now Hale stands at the narrow strip of asphalt where east meets west, where concrete and ideology collide. A floodlight hums overhead, bathing the checkpoint in harsh, white glare. Snow begins to fall, early, wet flakes that melt on contact. Across the barrier, he sees movement. An East German officer steps aside, and behind him, a Soviet uniform. Not a tank crewman, not infantry. A senior officer, Colonel Alexei Morozov, walks forward slowly, hands visible, breath fogging in the cold air. He looks older than Hale remembers, thinner, but the eyes are the same. For a moment, no one moves. Weapons remain lowered, but ready. This is how wars start, or how they end. Morozov stops at the painted white line. He does not cross. "Captain Hale," he says calmly, voice carrying across the space. "You received my letter." Hale steps forward before anyone can stop him. "Yes," he answers. Around them, engines idle, radios hiss. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell rings. 8 times. Morozov's gaze flicks briefly to the sky, as if calculating how much time remains. "Then you understand why I wrote it," Morozov says. Hale swallows. "I understand why you think you had to." A faint, grim smile touches Morozov's mouth. "My words," he says, "are the last weapons we have not yet outlawed." Snow thickens between them, falling on helmets and shoulders alike, erasing borders grain by grain. In his pocket, Hale feels the folded paper, ink and doubt and fragile hope. The world is balanced on a sentence not yet spoken. Section 2. Words at the White Line. October 22nd, 1962. Checkpoint Charlie, Berlin. 2017 hours. Snow settles into the grooves of the painted white line like chalk dust. For a moment, it almost erases it entirely. Almost. Captain James R. Hale feels the vibration of the Patton tank through the soles of his boots. A low mechanical growl that never quite stops. Behind him, an American sergeant tightens his grip on an M14 rifle. No one speaks. No one breathes too loudly. Across the line, Colonel Alexei Morozov stands still. Posture straight but not rigid. Hands open at his sides. His greatcoat bears the weight of rank. Red piping dulled by years of service, brass buttons catching the floodlight in brief flashes. Snow clings to his shoulders and melts into darkened patches. The floodlight hums. Somewhere to the east, a radio crackles, then falls silent. This is not protocol. Everyone here knows it. Hale is aware of every rule he is breaking, and every rule that has already failed. "Why here?" Hale asks, finally, his voice steady but low. "Why now?" Morozov's eyes do not leave him. "Because here," he says, "the world can see us." A pause. "And now, because later may not exist." The words hang in the cold air, heavier than the snow. Hale glances sideways, just for a fraction of a second. The American checkpoint building looms behind him. Concrete, sandbags, a flag snapping in the wind. He knows Colonel Watkins will already be on the phone, somewhere, perhaps yelling into Washington, perhaps being yelled at, perhaps neither. Morozov shifts his weight slightly. It is the smallest movement, but it ripples through both lines of soldiers. Fingers twitch. Boots scrape. Easy, Hale murmurs, not sure who he is speaking to. Morozov inclines his head, acknowledging the tension. I did not come to negotiate, Morozov says. I came to warn. About Cuba, Hale replies. A flicker, surprise, or perhaps respect, passes across Morozov's face. Yes. The word is soft, final. Hale feels his chest tighten. Then you know we're already aware. You are aware of missiles, Morozov says. You are not aware of orders. The sentence lands like a stone. Behind Hale, an American radio squawks to life. All units maintain position. Do not escalate. Repeat. Do not. The transmission cuts out. Morozov continues, his voice calm, almost instructional. There are men in Moscow, he says, who believe America will blink. There are men in Washington. His eyes flick briefly toward the west. Who believe the same of us. Snowflakes melt on Hale's eyelashes. He blinks them away. And you? Hale asks. Morozov allows himself a thin, tired smile. I believe in mathematics, he says, and in probability, and in graves. Silence returns, thicker now. Hale remembers Vienna, the balcony, the Danube flowing beneath them, indifferent to borders. He remembers Morozov's cigarette smoke curling into the summer air. History is made by men who follow orders. What exactly are you warning me about? Hale asks. Morozov exhales slowly, as if measuring each word. If the blockade tightens, he says, there will be pressure to respond elsewhere. Berlin is not a city to us. It is leverage. Hale stiffens. You're saying, I am saying, Morozov interrupts gently, that tanks here may be ordered forward, not to conquer, to test. The American sergeant behind Hale swallows audibly. And if someone panics? Hale asks. Morozov's gaze drops to the white line between them. Then history accelerates. Minutes stretch. Snow thickens. From the east, headlights flare briefly as an East German truck rolls to a stop. The silhouettes of Vopos, People's Police, shift uneasily. Young faces pale beneath steel helmets. Hale's mind races. He is a trained intelligence officer, taught to assess threats, to identify deception. But this is not an interrogation. It is a confession. Why tell me? Hale asks. Why not your superiors? Morozov's jaw tightens. I have, he says, in writing, in meetings, in careful language. And careful language is easily ignored. Hale feels the letter in his pocket again, the creased paper pressing against his chest like a second heart. You know what this looks like, Hale says, to my people. Morozov nods once. Treason or manipulation. And to yours? Morozov's lips press into a thin line. Defeatism, he says. Weakness. The floodlight flickers for half a second, then steadies. Hale takes a step closer to the line. Not across it. Never across it. What are you asking of me? He says. Morozov meets his eyes fully now. A delay, he says. Confusion. A pause long enough for men far away from here to reconsider. Hale almost laughs. Almost. You're asking for a miracle. Morozov's expression does not change. No, he says. I'm asking for a message. The memory comes unbidden. October 16th, 1962. A briefing room in Berlin. A grainy photograph pinned to a board. Missile silhouettes rising from Cuban soil. A colonel's voice explaining ranges, payloads, flight times. Washington in minutes. New York in less. Hale had felt then what he feels now. The shrinking of the world. I can't promise anything, Hale says. I did not expect you to, Morozov replies. A gust of wind sweeps through the corridor, driving snow sideways. The sound of it rattles loose metal, signage, the faint clink of tank equipment. Morozov reaches slowly into his coat. Every weapon on both sides shifts upward in unison. Stop! Hale snaps. Morozov freezes, hand half withdrawn. Slowly, Hale says. Morozov obeys. He produces a small folded paper, not unlike Hale's own letter. I anticipated this reaction, Morozov says quietly. This is not a weapon. Hale hesitates, then nods. Morozov sets the paper down on the ground, just short of the line. Snow dusts its edges immediately. Coordinates? Hale asks. No, Morozov says. Names, times, units. Hale stares at it. If this is real, it is, Morozov says. And if it is used recklessly, it will be denied. Hale knows that truth. Intelligence is only valuable if it can be buried. Why trust me? Hale asks. Morozov's eyes soften, just a fraction. Because in Vienna, he says, you listened. A church bell rings again, 9 times. The sound echoes through the concrete corridor, distorted, mournful. Hale crouches slowly, every movement deliberate. He reaches down and picks up the paper. It is damp already, ink beginning to bleed. He does not open it. Colonel, Hale says, standing again, you know this won't stay between us. Morozov nods. Nor should it. What happens to you if this goes wrong? Morozov considers the question. History, he says, will decide whether I was a fool or a traitor. And until then, Morozov's mouth curves into something like a smile. I go back to my post, he says. I follow orders, as long as they make sense. Snow accumulates now, softening edges, muting sound. The tanks look less like machines and more like hulking shapes in a dream. Hale tucks the second paper into his coat, next to the letter. Colonel, he says, if tanks move here, they will not tonight. Morozov says, that much I can promise. Hale studies his face, searching for cracks. Tomorrow? Hale asks. Morozov looks past him, toward the west, toward a world of decisions being made far above their heads. Tomorrow, he says, belongs to men who believe they are right. The two stand there, enemies by doctrine, allies by circumstance, separated by a line of paint and a century of fear. Finally, Morozov steps back. The East German officer reappears at his side, whispering urgently. Morozov raises a hand. Silence. Captain Hale, he says, voice carrying one last time across the space. Words can cross borders more easily than armies. Hale nods. And sometimes, Morozov adds, they are harder to stop. Morozov turns and walks back into the shadows, swallowed by uniforms and darkness. The white line remains. The snow keeps falling. Hale stands alone for a long moment. The weight in his pocket doubled now, his breath visible in the cold air. Behind him, the Patton tank idles. Ahead of him, the wall waits. And somewhere across an ocean, men argue over maps and photographs, unaware that a sentence has already crossed the border. Section 3. The Weight of Paper. October 22nd, 1962. West Berlin. 22:41 hours. The snow follows Hale all the way back from the checkpoint, clinging to his boots, his coat, his thoughts. The Jeep's tires hiss against wet pavement as it moves through near-empty streets. Street lamps glow like tired eyes, their light diffused by falling snow and drifting exhaust. Berlin at night feels hollow, its usual noise muted, as if the city itself is listening. Hale sits in the back, collar turned up, gloved hands resting on his knees. He does not speak. Neither does the driver. In Hale's pocket, 2 folded papers press against his chest. He is acutely aware of them now, as if they generate heat of their own. The first letter, the second list, ink and consequence. The Jeep slows at an intersection where military police wave it through without inspection. Faces are pale. Movements are clipped. Everyone knows something is happening. No one knows exactly what. That uncertainty is the most dangerous thing of all. Headquarters smells of old coffee and ozone. The building hums with activity, even at this hour. Phones ringing, boots moving quickly down corridors, voices kept deliberately low. Hale is halfway down the hall when a voice stops him. Captain. Colonel Watkins stands outside his office, jacket off, tie loosened. The lines around his eyes seem deeper than they were this morning. He looks like a man who has not blinked in hours. Sir, Hale says. Watkins studies him for a long moment, then nods toward the office. Inside, the door closes with a dull final sound. Watkins does not sit. Neither does Hale. You were seen, Watkins says. No accusation, just fact. Off the line, Hale replies. Yes. Another pause. You want to explain why a Soviet colonel was standing 10 feet from my officer during the most volatile night in 20 years? Hale reaches slowly into his coat. Watkins's jaw tightens. His hand moves, not to a weapon, but to the desk, grounding himself. Hale produces the second paper and sets it down. Watkins looks at it as if it might explode. What is this? He asks. Something you need to see, Hale says. And something you need to handle very carefully. Watkins opens the paper. Names, units, times, armor movements, readiness states, contingency triggers. Watkins reads once, then again. When he looks up, the room feels colder. Where did this come from? He asks quietly. You already know, Hale says. Watkins exhales through his nose. This is poison, he says. If it's real. It is, Hale replies. And if it's not used properly, it won't matter. Watkins walks to the window. Outside, snow streaks past the glass. You understand, Watkins says slowly, that if this is fabricated and we act on it. I do, Hale says. And if it's ignored, Watkins does not turn around. Yes, he says, I know. Silence stretches between them, thick with implication. Finally, Watkins speaks again. You know I can't credit this officially, he says. I wouldn't ask you to. Watkins turns now, eyes sharp. Then why bring it to me? Because unofficially, Hale says, you know who to call. Watkins's mouth tightens. Then, reluctantly, he nods. Go home, he says. Stay available. Do not leave the city. Yes, sir. As Hale turns to leave, Watkins speaks once more. Captain. Hale stops. If this man is wrong, Watkins says, or lying, history will not be kind to either of you. Hale meets his gaze. If he's right, Hale says, history may never notice at all. Watkins does not answer. Hale's apartment is dark when he enters. He does not turn on the main light. Instead, he moves to the small desk by the window and sits. Outside, Berlin breathes quietly. He removes both papers from his coat and places them side by side. The first letter, the warning. The second, the mechanism. Hale reads them again, slowly, methodically. He thinks of Morozov's voice. Calm, precise, tired. Berlin is not a city to us. It is leverage. Hale rubs his eyes. He has been trained to think in probabilities, in threat matrices, in acceptable losses. But the letter resists categorization. It does not ask for allegiance. It asks for restraint. A knock at the door startles him. 3 sharp raps. Official. Familiar. Hale stands slowly, heart hammering, and opens the door. A young lieutenant stands in the hallway, snow melting on his cap. Captain Hale, he says, you're needed downstairs. Secure line. Hale grabs his coat. As they descend the stairs, the lieutenant speaks again. Sir, he says quietly, they're saying the president just addressed the nation. Hale stops short. When? An hour ago, naval quarantine. He called it a quarantine, not a blockade. Hale exhales. Words matter. They always have. The secure room is small, windowless, a single table, a single phone. The kind of place where decisions echo longer than voices. Watkins is already there, along with 2 men Hale does not recognize. Both wear civilian suits. Neither smile. Captain Hale, one of them says, extending a hand. Mr. Adler. The other nods. Mr. Barnes. No agency is mentioned. None is needed. Sit, Watkins says. The phone on the table rings once. Then again, Watkins answers. Yes, he's here. Understood. He hangs up and looks at Hale. You're going to explain, Watkins says, exactly what was said at that line. Every word, every pause. Hale nods. He begins. As he speaks, the men listen without interruption. They do not take notes. They do not ask questions. They exchange glances only once. When Hale recounts Morozov's warning about tanks moving to test, when Hale finishes, the room is silent. Mr. Barnes breaks it. If this is accurate, he says, it suggests a secondary pressure strategy. Mr. Adler nods. Berlin is a tripwire. Watkins looks at Hale. Do you believe him? Hale answers without hesitation. Yes. The men in suits study him. Why? Adler asks. Because he didn't ask to win, Hale says. He asked to pause. Another silence. Finally, Barnes stands. We'll pass this along, he says, carefully. Hale looks at the phone. To whom, he asks. Barnes's expression is unreadable. To men, he says, who also understand the weight of paper. Hours pass. Coffee grows cold. Outside the secure room, the world inches closer to catastrophe, or away from it. Hale has no way of knowing which. Sometime after midnight, the phone rings again. Watkins answers, listens, nods once. He hangs up and looks at Hale. Stand down, he says quietly. For now. Hale searches his face. What changed? He asks. Watkins hesitates. Nothing, he says, and that may be everything. Hale leaves the building just as the snow begins to thin. The night sky lightens almost imperceptibly toward dawn. He stops on the steps and looks east. Somewhere beyond the wall, Morozov is likely doing exactly what he said he would do. Returning to his post, following orders that still make sense. For now, Hale lights a cigarette with shaking hands. He does not smoke often. Tonight feels like an exception history might allow. Smoke curls upward, vanishing into the cold air. He thinks of the white line, still there, still unbroken. He thinks of words crossing borders, and he wonders how long the pause will last. Section 4. The Pause. October 23rd, 1962. West Berlin. Usk is 6:18 hours. Dawn arrives without ceremony. The sky lightens to a dull gray, the kind that never quite becomes morning. Snow still clings to ledges and windowsills, but the streets are wet now, slush forming along the curbs. Berlin exhales as if it has survived something it cannot yet name. Captain James R. Hale has not slept. He stands at his apartment window, coffee untouched on the sill, watching a tram rattle past below. Its bell rings once, sharp and ordinary, a sound that feels almost inappropriate after the night before. In his coat pocket, the papers are gone. Watkins took them, carefully. At headquarters, the atmosphere has shifted, not relaxed, but altered. The frantic edge has dulled into something more controlled, more dangerous in its restraint. Conversations are shorter. Doors stay closed longer. Orders are phrased with unusual precision. Hale moves through the corridors like a ghost, nodding to familiar faces, receiving nods in return. No one asks where he was last night. No one asks what he knows. That silence is intentional. A major stops him near the operations board. You're on standby, the major says. No movement unless cleared. For what? Hale asks. The major hesitates. Everything, he says and walks on. Men across the city, beyond the wall. Morning comes differently. Colonel Alexei Morozov stands in his office, cap resting on the desk, coat still on. He has also not slept. A samovar steams quietly in the corner, untouched. A map of Berlin covers the wall opposite him. Red grease pencil markings indicate unit positions, checkpoints, response routes. Nothing has changed since last night, and that, Morozov knows, is the point. A junior officer enters, boots clicking sharply. Comrade Colonel, he says, no new directives. Morozov nods. Very well. The officer hesitates. Sir, the Americans? Morozov meets his eyes. They are doing exactly what we are, he says. Waiting. The officer leaves. Morozov allows himself to sit, for the first time in hours. Oh. At Oro 9 Zars, radios across Berlin carry the same voice. President Kennedy. Hale listens from a small briefing room, standing at the back, arms crossed. The president speaks of missiles, of resolve, of restraint, of quarantine, not blockade, words chosen like pressure valves. Around Hale, officers listen intently. Some nod, some frown. One man quietly exhales when the speech ends. No one applauds. By midday, intelligence trickles in. Soviet ships slow. Some turn. Not all. In Berlin, armored units remain in place on both sides of the line. Engines are warmed. Crews are alert. But no one advances. The white line remains untouched. Hale returns to Checkpoint Charlie in the early afternoon, officially this time. The same floodlights hang overhead, now useless in daylight. The same concrete, the same wire. The tanks are still there, but farther back, just enough to notice. An American sergeant approaches him. "Sir," he says quietly. They pulled back about 20 meters. Hale nods. He does not smile. 20 meters is not peace, but it is not war. He walks to the edge of the checkpoint and looks east. Morozov is not there. Instead, a younger Soviet officer stands watch, face impassive, eyes forward. They do not acknowledge one another. That too is deliberate. Hale touches his coat pocket out of habit, then stops himself. It is empty now. The weight is gone, transferred upward, outward, into rooms where decisions are abstracted into arrows and phrases. He wonders if Morozov feels the same lightness or the same dread. That evening, Hale receives a call. Watkins' voice is tired but controlled. "They're talking," Watkins says. "Not officially, not publicly, but talking." "And Berlin?" Hale asks. "Avoided," Watkins says. "For now." Hale closes his eyes briefly. "For now," he repeats. Watkins hesitates. "Your colonel friend may have bought us time, or borrowed it," Hale says. "Yes," Watkins agrees. "That too." Night falls again. This time, Berlin does not feel hollow. It feels suspended. Lights glow. Trams run. People move cautiously, instinctively, as if the city itself understands it has been granted a temporary reprieve. Hale steps outside once more, the air colder now, clearer. He looks toward the wall, invisible from here but ever present. He thinks of Morozov, back at his desk, following orders that still make sense. He thinks of men in Washington and Moscow, weighing words against consequences, and he understands something with quiet certainty. The most dangerous moments are not when weapons fire, but when they do not. Because restraint, unlike force, must be chosen again and again. And tomorrow, that choice will return. Burst, Section 5. The Unwritten Outcome. October 24th to 28th, 1962. Berlin, Washington, Moscow. Morning comes again, and then another. Not with explosions, not with sirens, but with routine. That, Hale learns, is how the world survives the edge. October 24th, 1962, West Berlin. At 07 hours, Checkpoint Charlie opens, as it always has. Papers are checked. Vehicles are waved through. Boots strike pavement in familiar rhythms. To an outsider, it looks like nothing has changed. But Hale notices the details. The tanks remain farther back than before. Engines are warm, but not running. Crews linger beside them instead of inside. On the eastern side, patrol routes have shifted slightly. Not closer, not farther. Just adjusted. Calculated hesitation. Hale stands near the checkpoint hut, hands clasped behind his back, eyes forward. He does not cross the line. He never does. Across the corridor, a Soviet officer observes him briefly, then looks away. No salute, no acknowledgement. That too is intentional. In Washington, the language grows more careful. Briefings avoid absolutes. Words like inevitable and unacceptable quietly disappear, replaced by options and channels. Backroom discussions lengthen. Draft statements are written, rewritten, then shelved. The quarantine holds. Soviet ships slow again. Some turn back entirely. Others drift at the edge of enforcement, close enough to provoke, far enough to avoid collision. The world watches maps, but the real movement happens elsewhere. October 25th, 1962, Moscow. Colonel Alexei Morozov is summoned just after midnight. The office he enters is larger than his own. Warmer, heavier with tobacco smoke. A portrait of Lenin watches from the wall, unblinking. He stands at attention as questions are asked. Not accusations, not yet. He answers carefully. Factually, he does not mention a letter. He does not mention a white line painted on cold asphalt. He speaks of readiness levels, of discipline, of stability. When he is dismissed, no one tells him whether he has convinced them. He leaves knowing only this: he has not been arrested. That, in this world, counts as mercy. October 26th, 1962, West Berlin. Hale receives no new orders. Instead, he receives silence. Watkins passes him once in the corridor, nods, and keeps walking. The civilian men in suits do not reappear. The secure phone does not ring. The weight of paper has lifted, but the weight of consequence has not. That evening, Hale walks the perimeter alone. Snow has melted entirely now, leaving damp stone and bare concrete. The wall looks older without snow, more permanent. He stops where the white line cuts across the ground. Scuffed, faded, still there. He imagines how easily it could be crossed. He imagines how little it would take. October 27th, 1962, Black Saturday. The closest day, the one history will name later. A U-2 reconnaissance plane is shot down over Cuba. A pilot dies. In Washington, the room goes quiet in a way Hale recognizes, even from across an ocean. Here it comes, everyone thinks. Here it finally comes. At checkpoint Charlie, orders tighten. Guards double. Radios stay live. No one jokes, no one smokes. Hale spends the entire day on site. Nothing happens. No tanks move. No lines are crossed. The most dangerous day of the Cold War passes Berlin by without sound. Only later will Hale understand how narrow that margin was. October 28th, 1962. The announcement comes in the early afternoon. Moscow agrees to remove the missiles. The words arrive first as rumor, then as confirmation, then as fact. At headquarters, a cheer almost breaks out, but dies quickly. Too many men understand what almost happened. Hale hears the news standing by a radio, hands resting on the table, head bowed slightly. He does not smile. Across the city, life resumes more fully. Shops open longer. Trams fill. Laughter returns, cautiously, like an animal testing unfamiliar ground. Berlin has survived. Again. 2 days later, Hale returns to the checkpoint one last time. The tanks are gone. Not withdrawn, repositioned, out of sight, out of mind. The corridor feels wider without them. Less crowded, no less symbolic. A Soviet officer stands watch on the far side. Not Morozov. Hale waits longer than necessary, scanning faces he does not know. Morozov never appears. Weeks pass, then months. Hale eventually learns, through channels that never fully close, what became of the colonel. Reassigned. Not promoted, not punished. Moved to a desk job. Fewer troops, fewer decisions. Alive. That, Hale decides, is victory enough. Years later, long after the wall has risen higher, and later still, after it has fallen, Hale will tell no one this story. It will not appear in memoirs. It will not be footnoted in histories. There will be no photograph of the letter, no transcript of the words exchanged at the line, only the outcome. A war that did not happen, a city that did not burn, and two men, on opposite sides of a painted line, who chose words when the world expected weapons. History will record treaties. It will record speeches. It will record missiles dismantled and ships turned away. It will not record the pause. But without that pause, nothing else would have mattered.